Great, thanks. So welcome to OpenHour. It's August 2019, and in this OpenHour, we're going to be talking a bit about odor. I think as a few of you who were on now actually helped contribute to the Public Lab's recent publication on the Community Science Forum on odor. And so we're going to share a little bit about the material that was in that, but also wanting to take a moment to share the line with people who are interested with odor, who have concerns about odors in their communities. So to begin the open hour, we'll go around and do some brief introductions. And if you could say your name, where you're calling in from, and something that brought you to the call today that you're interested in learning about or sharing with others. And we'll do that as a brief intro, and then we'll get a little bit more in depth on the topic. But just to kick it off, my name is Stevie Lewis. I am calling in from Miami. And one of the things I'm interested in learning more about is people's experiences in doing odor logs and odor logging. I'll be working with a community group later next week on a different kind of logging. And I was wondering experiences that people have in tracking those things and what they find helpful, what you find helpful in terms of using descriptive words in logging. So that's one thing I'm interested in. And I'll just go around in a circle here based on who I see in the call. So my top left corner is Mimi. Can you go off mute, Mimi?
Hi guys, I'm Mimi. I'm calling in from New Orleans. I'm also on the Public Lab team. And my interest here, I'm our education manager, and I'd love to learn more about the kind of work that you guys are doing so that I can think on how to translate that for students in classrooms who might also be experiencing issues with odor in their community.
Great, thank you, Mimi. And Dr. Shelly Miller, you're next on my list. Can you go off mute?
Hi, I'm calling in from Boulder, Colorado, and I have been working with a couple of our local Denver communities to understand and address some of the industrial odors that are in their community. One of the things that we're really interested in trying to figure out how to do better is how can we use technology to collect information about what community members are experiencing. So along the lines of the log that you mentioned, Stevie, but more, can you use your smartphone to just record an odor and where you are and how it's affecting you? And so because we find that was a helpful way to address and understand odors in our last project. So how do we do technology in these communities and use the information to solve the problem?
Great, thank you. Joe, are you available?
Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Joe Hoy. I am the communications manager for Public Lab based out of the New Orleans office. I recently worked on our most recent publication, the Community Science Forum, based on odor logging that has information and contributions from a lot of community members, including Dr. Shelly Miller. Thank you so much for your participation in that. I'm going to share a link in the chat to where you can read more information, those articles online, or if you want to get a physical copy. But yeah, I am very interested in this topic and will also be joining Stevie on some community events in Wisconsin for some kind of related topics, but looking forward to hearing what people are looking at in their communities right now.
Thanks, Joe. John King, are you available? Okay, great. I see that you're available in chat only. If you have the opportunity to type in where you're calling in from and a topic that you're interested in sharing with others today, that would be great, and I can read out for you. Liz, are you available?
Hi, I'm Liz Barry, calling in from Brooklyn, and I'm here as a staff of Public Lab and also to connect later with the Houston community members who had questions about odor but weren't able to be on this call. And I also wanted to thank Naima for joining today and for taking my call earlier. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Leslie?
Hey there, I'm in Philly. I volunteer for Public Lab when I can, and I would say that I have an interest in a lot of things. I think the first would be I'm really interested in people that have been fighting CAFOs and how they were able to do that process. And I'm also interested in what is the tipping point from when a community recognizes smells of gases to the point where they're also starting to monitor gases that they can't smell, which might be even more dangerous. Thanks.
Great, and I'm just taking a couple notes on my computer if you hear my online, I'm tracking your topics. Nima, can you still hear us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, great.
Okay, so go ahead.
And you said you're calling in from North Carolina?
Yeah, I'm calling in. I live in Rocky Mount, in North Carolina, which is the eastern part of the state. And my work with odor, with measuring, well, not measuring odor, though. You don't measure it, but in recording odor effects was when we did this project called Community Health Effects of Industrial Hog Operations. And in doing that work, we had the participants were asked to sit outside twice a day for 10 minutes at a time, and they had a journal that they would log the odor, whether or not they were smelling odor, and to give the strength of the smell. And once they did that, they would go back inside, take their blood pressure, breathe into a peak flow meter, and do saliva samples for lung capacity to see what effect we were seeing from people once they were exposed. And and that's what they did. And each participant will participate for 14 days, and every day they were asked to sit outside twice a day for 10 minutes at a time of their choosing, once in the morning, once in the evening, and rate the odor, and then go back inside and do the things that I just mentioned: the blood pressure, the lung capacity, and saliva samples.
Wow, what an interesting project. Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay, you're welcome. And thank y'all for having me on the call. Liz called me this morning. I really was torn between whether or not I could participate because I'll be on the road driving, trying to get to a meeting. So I said, well, I think I can do two things at one time. So I'm giving it my best shot.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just read back in. John King is calling in from West Virginia. Great to connect with you. And he's saying, I hope to learn more about documenting and reporting odor problems. And last, Sarah, I think are you on the line still? Are you able to give an intro and talk about what you're interested in?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Sarah. I'm here for a couple of reasons. One is that I work for Sarah Wiley, Dr. Sarah Wiley, who's involved with Public Lab, so taking notes for her. And also, I live in Worcester, Massachusetts, and we have a big problem with gas leaks in our community. And so part of our work is on finding ways to visualize gas leaks, which are things that we can smell, but that sometimes the smell is masked. So yeah, interested in it from that perspective as well.
Great, thank you. So just to keep track here, we have a couple topics that are floating to the surface here. There's a couple on specific sources for smells related to CAFOs and related to oil and gas. And then we have a couple as well that are people interested in exploring the logging and the functions of odor logging, and about the tools and technologies that are available as well. But to get started, I think Naima, you gave us a great foot to jump off from in terms of the story and a sampling protocol that you went through with your community. And I was wondering, can you speak a little bit to your experience with that? What it was like for your community and some outcomes of that work?
Okay, so yes, I can. And I guess the last part I kind of cut off because as the community members were doing their documentation and they were keeping a journal each day where they would log in all of this information, and they would take the blood pressure and they would print it out and tape it to the journal page for that day. And at the same time that was going on, we had a PM machine monitoring outside. We had a weather vane station, and we were capturing the fine particles in the air that you can't see, but we felt that they were getting trapped in the people's lungs, and that's why there were so many problems with asthma and upper respiratory problems and things. And then people were just angry from having to live like that, and so their stress levels were off the chart, which elevates the blood pressure and stuff. And that's why we were looking at all those features. And the PM machine was used mainly as a backdrop as a backup for what people were saying they were smelling, because our legislators and the industry was telling our legislators that people were lying. They were making this stuff up, and that the odor did not leave the property line from which it was created, and which we knew to be a lie, because you can't make air stand still. And so the PM machine was measuring the hydrogen sulfide in the air at the time that the odor is alive. And so based on the strength that people were recording, the PM machine verified that whenever people know the high rates of odor, that the hydrogen sulfide monitor was off the charts as well. And so it was scientific evidence that people were not making this stuff up, that they were not manufacturing this information. And as a result of that study, which we did for about 5 years, the study went on for about 5 years. As a result of the study, the community people began to feel better about themselves and more confident about attacking and talking about what was happening to them and going to their elected officials and, telling their stories and fighting for policy change to try to create better conditions in their community.
Wow, thank you for sharing how in depth. That's so much work. I want to do a quick hello and intro for 2 other new joiners that we've had on. But when after that, I'd love to get back and hear another story of how this odor monitoring has been used within a community. And then from there, open it up to questions and conversations. Beth, I see you're calling in from the Pennsylvania Health Project. Are you available to say where you're calling in from and a topic that brought you into this call today?
Yeah, I am located in New Haven, Connecticut, although I work with a group based south of Pittsburgh, and we work exclusively on the public health consequences of fracking, shale gas and oil development. And odors figure prominently in the complaints that we hear from community members. We work all through that region, and we have a national exposure and health registry, and we do some community science work and health impact assessments. And so I was drawn to this because I feel like we would be interested in ways to help communities document odors and come up with the language and that kind of thing.
Great, thank you. And Shose, are you available to say where you're calling in from and what you're interested in the call today and talking about in the call?
Yes, I'm calling from close to Barcelona in a tiny village or colony, and I'm interested because we're developing these tiny, easy-to-do techniques. I mean, we come from the documentary investigation and with touching a little bit of things in investigation and relating to others. We've done this grid, is published on the public lab, based on the on something I found from I can't remember. Well, I agreed to monitor odors and with paper and pencil, and I'm interested in the matter.
Thanks, Shose. And Dr. Miller, I was wondering if I could push it back over to you to give us another story or example of your work in monitoring odors with communities in Colorado.
Yeah, sure. Because I'm an air pollution expert, I do lots of sampling of air pollutants, and it's kind of difficult to figure out what to monitor when you have an odor problem. In our community in Denver, there was a lot of complaints about a strong asphalt smell. And so we worked with a couple of community members and we provided them with high research grade sampling equipment where they could sample the air into a big canister, and then we would send the canister away for VOCs, volatile organic compound analysis, and semi-volatile organic compound analysis to try to figure out what was in the odor. And because the odor was so transient, it was often difficult to get a long enough odor episode to collect the sample. So we succeeded, and a couple of times we found very, very high concentrations of naphthalene, which is a carcinogenic, very toxic compound that is associated with asphalt manufacturing. So we were able to document that, but often you find pollutants that are the same as in traffic, like benzene or particles that also come from traffic and not necessarily specific odor sources. And I know that the last case had hydrogen sulfide involved, but not all odors have that. So it can be a very complicated issue. And so what we did the last study was have people document what that smelled like that they thought, and they reported it and where they were, and not have to do any air pollution monitoring as a way. But I think it's important to try to do that as well. I love the story from New Orleans.
Okay, and thank you so much. I'm just jumping in to say that that's a story from Rocky Mount, North Carolina.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I missed it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have someone else joining us in. If you want to drop in the chat, if you're available, your name, where you're calling in from or what you prefer to be called, and topics that you're interested in sharing, we'll move past the formal introduction moment and speaking time and move into moving on from the stories. I would love the opportunity for people to ask questions or to share other stories that these have brought up for you. Great. Leslie.
I wanted to hear more about that project in Rocky Mountain area, or wherever that person's from, because I was interested in the health aspect, and I wanted to hear more about the findings, if there was a strong connection between the health that the people found when they were recording.
Great name. I know you're driving.
Okay. Yeah. Excuse me. Okay. Yeah. So, in doing that work, when the conclusion of the project, we found that people were having high rates of asthma, especially among school-age children. They had high rates of asthma, was on more asthma medication and missing more time out of school as a result of their exposure. We found a lot of elevated blood pressure, a lot of stress and mood changes. People just being mentally stressed out from having to live like that and feeling like they were prisoners in their own homes. Many people talked about feeling like they had to negotiate with the air, like they would get up in the morning and check outside before they went out to see if there was odor, because if the odor was there, they did not want to go outside. And if the odor was not there, they would rush out to do any outdoor activity and try to beat the odor. So they would rush out to do what they had to do so they could get back in before the odor started up. And what we also know is that the industry, once they found out that we were in the neighborhood monitoring, they would change their behavior, which would cut down on the amount of exposure that was able to be documented. But it was so much so that the community people would say, can y'all just get a dummy of this equipment and leave it out here so they'll think it's still here, so that, they won't continue their spraying. Because the problem was coming from the way they handle the waste from these animals. They have what they call open air lagoons and spray fields. So when the lagoons fill up, they would spray the waste out using industrialized irrigators and spray the waste out around the community on crops and stuff. And that's what was creating so many problems for the community people. It's the way they handle that waste. But it also caused community members to form organizations that's continuing on to this day, where they are looking at environmental hazards in their community and ways to fight against these things. We had a lot of help from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. The lead PI in the work that we were doing, the principal investigator was Dr. Steve Wing from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, who was professor there in the School of Public Health, Department of Epidemiology. And he orchestrated most of this work. And I was a part of the team for that project, and did a lot of the recruiting and organizing with communities. It also formed relationships with community members. One of the things that I found as an organizer going around talking with people, community members, everybody knew there was a problem, but they were not talking about it, and they were not talking to each other. And so my question always to them was, why are y'all not talking to each other? Why are you not sharing your stories and, just trying to find out and get to the bottom of what's going on in your community? And what can we do to stop this kind of behavior? And so getting people to understand the need to pay attention to what's going on in their community and to pay attention to any kind of energies that was saying they would come in there for economic development and promising jobs. And then we talk with people about, well, why don't you ask them what's the good in a job that's gonna maim your community and leave everybody so unhealthy and sick? Are those really the kind of jobs that you want? Get people to think about those things. And how did this stuff get there? What's going on with your zoning boards and your planning boards that these kinds of things can come into your community so easily? And so getting people to pay attention to those areas as well. And we had a professor from the University of North Carolina that was in the city and regional planning that would come talk with communities about ways that city and regional planning contributed to the problem and why they need to pay attention to what these local governments were doing and what they were accepting and buying into as economic development.
Thank you for sharing. This leads me to think of another question from your different projects that have explored sharing out about odor, whether you're using tools or technologies or logs or sharing stories. I'm interested to hear who in your work has this information reached, and what has it been like to share that kind of information with other people?
Okay, so the information really was kind of spread out through North Carolina and brought more attention to the communities that were having to live with these animals. And it began to get more and more people involved in questioning why are these industries allowed to operate in the way that they do in the state. And it really led us to filing a Title VI complaint against our Department of Environmental Quality, who is the regulatory agency in the state for issuing all of those permits for these contract growers with the industry to be able to do what they are doing and have these kinds of impacts on community members. And it's been a continuous battle in North Carolina for nearly 3 decades. We've been fighting the pork industry in North Carolina about the way they handle these animals. And there's this push for superior technology. And the superior technology is some technology that exists that the industry could use and put it on the ground if they would have the decency to do that, or if our elected officials would make them do that. And the superior technology, the amazing thing about that is the industry, Smithfield, was the owner of all these animals in North Carolina until they sold out to a Chinese company. But they were, able to buy our legislators, and I literally mean buy, B-U-Y, our legislators, and convince them that, everything, no matter what we said or did, it just was not so, that people were still making this stuff up. And our legislators, because they were more interested in getting the money than doing the right thing by the people that elected them, was just buying into all of this and passing laws and bills that was fighting against the will of the people. And, so it's been a hard struggle in North Carolina. And of course, myself and other people that been doing this work, we've been labeled troublemakers and liars and all, anything negative you could think of. And that we're trying to put farmers out of business, and so they've turned the contract growers against their community, against the people in their community, saying that they're trying to put them out of business. So, we spent some time trying to refute that, but then, we don't spend a lot of time doing that these days, because, the evidence is there that what they're saying is a lie. So we just kind of let it speak for itself. But the work that we've done has spread outside of North Carolina. It's really become a national recognition amongst people fighting against concentrated animal operations across the country. And we've been partnering with people from other states that's looking at this problem. And also people that's interested in what's happening with the food industry in this country have been, leaning towards our work and trying to look at ways for all of us to work together to try to make conditions better for everybody. We even have some of the Humane Society has been a big participant in the partnership work, the collaboration that we've been doing. The Waterkeeper Alliance, who, when we first began talking about these problems, they were, as a traditional environmental group, they were concerned about the waterways in North Carolina. And we were able to talk with them and get them to understand that while we were concerned about the water as well, our biggest concern was about the health of the people. And how do you talk about environmental injustice in a way that you are lifting up the people that's suffering rather than the things in the environment, that the people's lives have a greater importance. And so the waterkeepers, as a matter of fact, because of our coalition work together, added a statement into their mission, a statement that addresses environmental injustice from a human perspective.
Thank you. I want to give a minute if someone else wants to respond to that question or comment in on what Naima was saying.
If I could just make another comment, that we have found that it's difficult, and I love that they were able to show direct health effects through asthma and other health outcomes. One of the other outcomes that communities could look at is something called well-being, which is, you know, how happy is the community and community members, and so that's more of a subjective member. It's an important one, and I think that if a community is struggling to document health effects, they could also document the well-being of the community members, which is I think that is a really important thing to think about.
And can I ask a follow-up to that? Who would be bound to respond if well-being was degraded?
Who would be what?
Hi, Naima. This is Liz. My question was, as Dr. Shelly Miller just asked or just mentioned, that if we can't document health effects, we could document impacts on well-being. And I just, I wasn't sure, like, is there a government agency that has to respond to that, or a legislative body? Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that's a really important question, and personally, I think that the state, you know, the district, the city council, the local officials really need to be responding to complaints about well-being. There's no.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, we have reached out to our Department of Health and Human Services because we see that as a part of their role as the health agency in the state that's supposed to be concerned about the well-being of the people, that they need to be addressing this problem as well.
Thank you.
This is something that the who's responsible for well-being is something that came up recently on the Halt the Harms webinar on permitting, where the law group that was putting it on was saying that documenting well-being at your local community level around industry is one of the big things that can help in terms of the zoning and allowing of permits or not allowing of permits on a local level.
Okay, so that sounds like it circles and connects back to the city and regional planning lever that Naima mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay.
That, as well as our Department of Environmental Quality, who is supposed to be, concerned about the health of the people in the state as the regulatory agency in the state, and given the executive order passed by President Clinton, 12898, which says environmental justice has to be a consideration for any businesses doing business if they receive federal funding, and that should be a consideration. So what that said to us is, if you're a state agency issuing permits, then you've got to take into consideration environmental justice. And if you have people that's already overburdened, why would you put more there? And that's what we've been battling with our Department of Environmental Quality about. And that's what prompted us to file a Title VI complaint against them, is because they were just issuing one bad permit after another in the same community. Eastern North Carolina, which is the part of the state that I live in, is riddled with every kind of environmental hazard that exists in the state of North Carolina. We have coal ash, we have fracking, we have a pipeline trying to be ran through, we have landfills and chickens and turkeys and pigs, and we have 10 million pigs in North Carolina, and most of those 10 million pigs are in eastern North Carolina. North Carolina is number 2 in the country for hog production, but we're number 1 when you look at the density of the animals. And we have the top 10 hog producing counties in the country is in eastern North Carolina. And 2 of our counties have been deemed the hog capital of the world. Duplin County and Sampson County, which are next door neighboring counties. Duplin County has 2.2 million pigs, equating to about 45 animals per person in the county. And Sampson County has 32 animals per person in the county, with 2 million pigs in that county. And they are next door counties. I mean, you literally cross over in one county out of the other one without even realizing it.
Thanks for sharing. Jose, I'm interested in your thoughts on this, and also in hearing more about what your community is thinking about in terms of odor logging and how you use the information or look to use the information that you gather. It's such a different context, and I'd love to hear some more about what that looks like where you are.
In reality, we developed the log and really has not been implemented. We were talking to a local community in the Barcelona northern region. There's where all the contaminant facilities of the city are there. There's a water purifying installation. There's a trash burning site, a thermoelectrical plant. And, basically, we've gone to talk to several neighbors associations that are gathering IRENet. It's a platform that is protesting against these bad odors, basically. But the problem there is not bad odor. The problem there is a highly contaminated area by the trash burning facility. In reality, we presented the log, and contact has been a little bit lost. And we have transferred now to Calafot, that is in the countryside of Barcelona, and there's the biggest landfill in Catalonia. So it's the subsidiary landfill of all the landfills in the region, in the community, in the Comunidad Autonomous Community. It's a very big area, and we're going to work now with a high school, 12 to 17 years old, and let's see if here people. I mean, they've come to us in this way. We didn't want to show the law, so maybe there's a little bit more, I don't know, organization or willing to implement it. But it would be great if someone uses it. I mean, but that has not been implemented really. Maybe because, as always said, we are an organization, IMBEC. I didn't tell in the presentation that we are 2 people, and we basically are a little bit overloaded to make these contacts, because I think these tools are, if it's not used, because we have not the time maybe to go and present it to the affected local communities.
Yeah, I was here with you. That's what I was going to ask you, and I'm interested from people as well. I'm getting an echo. Are you all hearing an echo?
Sorry?
Yes, I muted
Okay.
Shosei for a moment. Sorry, Shosei. I also muted Naima for a moment. Sorry, Naima.
So the challenge is clearly in terms of time and rollout. That can happen on any kind of project. But what are some of the other challenges around odor logging or monitoring for odor that are specific to that topic? And I'll mute now.
I don't know, with my awful English, I understood that was not a question for me, right?
Yeah, actually, I think for anyone
Correct.
that,
correct.
Like, understand, like, clearly in rolling out any project, you have time barriers, getting the information out there. But when we're thinking specifically about odor, what are some of the challenges that we run into when we're thinking about monitoring for odors or logging or using tools around them?
I had a quick comment, which is that because of the technology side of things, we developed in-house an app that then we tried to push out into the community for a smartphone, and that seemed to work pretty well. But I do think getting more people to use it and getting people involved in using it is a difficult question. The other thing that we're interested in doing is using something like this. It's a small little monitoring device that you carry with you, and it measures the concentrations of volatile organic compounds, nitrogen oxide, and particulate matter. And then it also has a GPS, so it can tell where you are when the concentration was measured. And so we're trying to figure out if community members would like to use something like this to help understand exposure.
Great. Could I ask you to repeat the 3 things that it measures again? And also, does this device have a brand name? Is it open source? Things like that?
Correct.
This device is developed in Europe, and it's called the Flow, Flow, and it's developed by Plume Labs, Plume Labs, and it measures total volatile organic compounds, particulate matter of all different sizes, and nitrogen dioxide, NO2. So it's really geared towards urban air pollution, a traffic-related exposure or something like that. But I think perhaps the particulate matter and the TVOCs, and anyway, any measurement could be useful.
I have a follow-up question on: Are there any successful case studies in using numerical data, sensor data about air quality to change local air conditions? The background is that we found it extremely hard globally. It's been extremely hard to get impact off of comma-separated values files of numbers.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'm running into a rainstorm, and I really don't want to be on the phone trying to navigate traffic in this water.
No, please be safe. Thank you so much for jumping on. We appreciate it. Get to your destination safely.
Well, thank y'all, and if there's anything I need to know, Liz, would you send it to me or call me?
Yes, I certainly will. Thank you, Naima.
Naima,
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Y'all take care. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, back to you, Dr. Miller.
I think in my experience, it's been extremely difficult to link measurements with odor because odors tend to have a pretty low threshold for human perception. And it's often one or two chemicals that are causing the health effect and the irritation. And trying to figure out what chemical that is like a needle in a haystack, so to speak. So I think the science is lacking. It's really old science, and we are pretty behind in terms of trying to understand how to make measurements work for odor problem solving, in my personal opinion.
Leslie and Sarah, I wanted to give you both space to share stories or questions that you're interested in on these topics.
I would say that I know that I follow Clean Air Council in Philadelphia, and they just keep expanding their reach, and they have gone beyond air at this point. I think they're even changing what their mission statement is, but they've been doing a lot of work. For instance, I know that we just had a huge, I think it was like a gas explosion at a plant in South Philadelphia that caused a huge ruckus here in our city, and the plant has been closed down, which there are many environmental groups that have been fighting that plant for years for bad air quality. So I know they have even requested specific, air quality numbers from stations that are not far from that gas plant. So I feel like there is some way that you can fight with numbers, even if it's in a limited amount. I think my question with gases, though, comes with, will most gases trigger a 2.5 particle sensor? Because I don't think they necessarily do, and I think that might be part of the problem too, because then you have to 2.5 sensors you can pretty much get, or in the case of Philadelphia, you can borrow them from Clean Air Council if you want to do your own citizen science testing. But in the case of gas sensors, I'm like, now people have to get specific gas sensors for different gases, and it gets a little more complicated.
Yeah, that's accurate. I think that's a really good description of the problem. That the gas sensors are, like we found naphthalene. We just got lucky that that's the one compound that was really high on the day we monitored, but on other days we didn't see it at all. It's so that, yeah.
Yeah, and this is Sarah here. My other question was just exactly about how to characterize this stuff when you have something that smells, you don't know exactly what it is, and what do you do from there? I was sort of curious about other people's experiences with that.
In the issue of the Community Science Forum, we have these great illustrations that were done by a community member named Sarah Sage, which I'll post the link to. And it has helpful ways to describe the types of odors that you're smelling, which, the odors can be so difficult to understand that it's helpful having being able to break them down into types of odors, and at least that's something to go off of, so you have a record of that you can investigate further.
Cool, makes sense.
Are there other tools or resources available that that people are interested in talking about, or that others should look into? We've mentioned a couple apps and a couple devices. Are there other ones that are around?
This is kind of a weak stab here, but I would say that another thing is, what is the name of the organization I love that follows remote data, like satellite data, so that every time, yes, that's them. Sky Truth. So like the reason I like that is because sometimes if you're not sure, like there have been times where I thought I smelled something in Philly, and sure enough, I had gotten an alert that there was some sort of chemical spill or something that was picked up through that organization. So sometimes it doesn't have to come through the smell. Sometimes you can connect into some other event that may have happened pollution-wise that another type of sensing is picking up.
Very cool. Yeah. I feel like reporting odor is used as a proxy for reporting other kinds of exposures. And then this is an example of using aerial imagery to document what people are experiencing directly as odor. I appreciate that, and it kind of speaks a lot to the nature of environmental evidence. I'll probably send Naima a follow-up question on how the health study data was used. If it was used, did that go to a regulatory agency? I believe this case went to court. And I'm wondering, does anyone know, in terms of the other tools Stevie was asking for, do we know anything else about like a health study protocol, or what organizations do that kind of work? Like related to odor.
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually what we did was in the well-being study, we published our questionnaire that we used to document well-being that was based on another study. And so, you know, right now, if people wanted to use it, they'd have to contact us and we'd send them the well-being questionnaire. And that's probably the same with the health study. If it was published or there's a report, you can query the authors to get their tools for collecting the health data, and they would be able to provide those tools for you. So maybe that's something that might be useful to collect and put all in one place.
That's very interesting. I wonder are there any professional ethics from the medical field that prevents, say, like a standard method from being shared publicly such that it would be used by people who don't have the same professional and ethical training? Is there a constraint to sharing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't think so. I think it's a questionnaire that has references it's been validated and documented, and then I think people can use it. I don't think there's an issue. There's not an issue for somebody like me to share that with you.
Great.
This isn't about the health issue aspect, but I was just thinking, I think of Naima's example of doing that community rousing and gathering people together. But an easy tool that's sort of come into play for my own neighborhood has been the stupid app Nextdoor. Nextdoor has, it's like a neighborhood forum or neighborhood gossip, however you want to use it, for like neighborhoods. You can sign up, and it can be both regional and local. So I can choose if I want to be, putting out a post that's only for my neighborhood, or if I want to cover 3 neighborhoods in my area. But what I'm finding is it's really useful. Anytime there's like a large sound in my neighborhood, people are on there asking about it. I've had people post about smells before, and I wasn't even linking it to this conversation until this very minute, that could be a very helpful tool for people to start with, to say, hey, did you notice that smell last night? And maybe we should all get together at the coffee shop and talk about what other smells or where we think it's coming from. Like, you could harness some energy around it using that app, but I don't think that apps in other countries is a very US specific thing.
I'm on that in my neighborhood.
Yeah. So we're getting really close to the top of the hour here. There's been a lot of things shared, a lot of resources and stories. Some of the material that's been on the call we'll use to help update the odor wiki page on Public Lab. And if anyone is interested in helping to share materials up there, it'll just be publiclab.org/odor. But just before we get off, I want to thank everybody so much for taking time to join the call and share all these things. It's been really helpful to spend some in-person time or remote time talking about it. Before we go, does anyone have any last questions or things to share with the group?
I would like to say that the odor log is based on Sarah Sachs' first odor logging. It's a little bit expanded, but I couldn't remember her name at the beginning of the conversation, and he has a number, so I didn't know she was here. So hi, Sarah.
Great. Well, thank you everybody so much. I appreciate it and your time and energy here. And if you have also, if questions or resources come up as well on Public Lab, you can subscribe to the tag Odor, and you would get updates then whenever people post new resources or materials or questions related to odor. So if you go to publiclab.org/subscribe, you can subscribe to anything in there that you're interested in, but maybe particularly for this topic, subscribe to odor. Great, thanks so much, and I hope everybody have a wonderful day or evening for you, Jose.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.